So why don't we make our D minor 7 chord into a D dominant chord? All you have to do is change one note. It's not that dramatic. I mean, it's dramatic in its way, but it's not like violating, you know? So you go D, we change that one note, and you got, oh, now we just went from a minor 7 to a dominant 7. So a 2 chord, they'll still change it for a 5 chord of the key of G. So it'd be like D7 to the 5 chord. That's the 5 chord to the 1 chord, which is G. But when you get to the G, it's a dominant chord too. Yeah, exactly. So it'd be like D7 to G7 to C major 7, right? Then you go to the 6th chord and you raise the 3rd, and that's the 5 of D7, which is the 5 of G. So basically what's happened is you end up chasing resolution. You're chasing home, you know, like if people move from one house to another, but they never feel like it's a home. It's just a house. That's what these chords are. It's a house when you go from a G7, or when you go from a 5 chord, a 7 chord, to a 1 chord, which has to be major. Or if the house is a little bit not quite what you hoped it would be, then it'd be like a minor chord, you know, because you just resolve to a minor chord instead of a major chord. But you can't resolve to a dominant chord. In blues, it's not really resolved that way. It's always up in the air, kind of. You know what I mean? People get so comfortable with it, they feel like it's resolved every chord. But every chord, you're never in the key. You're never telling them the key. It's like, some people go so far as they try to, because to me, I think it's kind of a rationalization. Maybe somebody else has a better argument that I don't know about. But people will be like, well, in blues, the dominant chord is a 1 chord because it feels like a 1 chord. I was like, is it what it is because of what it feels like? Or is it what it is because of what it is? You know what I mean? Like, can we vote for snow on Christmas? Like, if I identify as a deity, lord, ruler of the universe, do I become one because I think I am? Or because I feel like I am? You know, so I'm not really for that, like, oh, well, it's a 1 chord, and the 4 chord is still a 4 chord even though it's dominant. It seems like they just throw everything out the window when they do that. And then all the pot-smoking, bongo-playing, Bob Marley shirt-wearing people like, yeah, throw away the rules. Yeah, that's creativity, man. But the thing is, when you throw out the rules, you're throwing out reality, you know? And you're throwing out possibility. Altogether, all possibility. So it's like, well, no, okay, if I recognize that I'm changing keys a lot, that means I have a whole plethora of chords that I could add into my blues, or take away. Like I could substitute one out for another is what I mean. Like you could do so many things. And how do you know what you can do? Well, you can do whatever, man, like no rules. And then they just fish around in the dark trying to find something that's cool. Because what's cool to them is abiding by rules they just haven't acknowledged, because the rules are still there. It's like law of gravity, you know. And then of course there's like secondhand rule, like secondhanders, where because someone will find something cool, I'll do it because they did it, I like it. I wouldn't have discovered it on my own, because if no one had done it before, I would have done it and thought it sounded weird. Somebody else did it, convinced me it's good, and now I do it, you know? Like, that's like somebody who society just dragging that guy along, you know? Some guy out there, some artist trying something new, and go, oh, that's cool. Whether he knew what he was doing or not, he found it, right? And then use it. You can see the stages here. You've got the guy who doesn't know what he's doing, he finds something cool, and it's cool, and so it's good, he's using it. And that is how slow evolution is in this way. People just groping around in the dark trying to find a good idea because they don't know what they're doing, you know, because they haven't observed reality. It's not a science to them. It's just blind wandering, you know. But yet, if they spend enough time and they look and they have some kind of like open mind in terms of like fresh ideas, even if they don't know what they're doing, but they're into fresh ideas, they'll discover some fresh ideas eventually. And it just takes a long time, and it's really arduous. And then you've got the people who like nothing is cool until it's like deemed cool by somebody else. Like I don't know why their own judgment's not good enough for them. They have to kind of go with the judgment of the tribe or some kind of community that way. And every community needs a leader, so naturally you just look to the leader, the dear leader, and see what he says. Stevie Ray Vaughan said this chord after that chord was cool, and so that's cool now, you know? And it probably was cool, Stevie Ray Vaughan. The point is, like, there's a third way, right? Surprise, surprise. It comes from knowing what you're doing, which means, like, knowing what are the materials you have to create with, right? So happens we're creating with music. That means we have to analyze sound. All of it, not just pitches and rhythms, but timbre, right? Duration is your notes, but that can be expanded upon to rhythms, polyrhythms, meter into polymeter, and just expands out. You just take these principles, and then you build out from them. And being in a key, knowing what key you're in, gives you the ability to change keys as often as you like, and in fancy creative ways, you know, like we were talking with the singer over the chords. Anyway, it's a lot of really exciting stuff. And that's just an example. That's talking about modes, which is really talking about all the chords within a key, right? There's one thing, actually, that's probably enough to think about. So there's one thing I want to mention beyond that, which is kind of cool, because we almost talked about it. And then after that, we'll generate some kind of homework type ideas. So one is like this. I was going to say before, in the very first question I asked you when we were trying to analyze one chord alone, I said diminished. I didn't say half diminished, right? And then I was like, wait, that's kind of a trick question. I'll say a half diminished, make it easier, because there's only one possibility, right? Now, if it's a diminished triad, it may seem like there's only one possibility. But what happens when you invert a diminished triad? Like, let's take a B diminished triad, for example. Your notes are B, D, and F. So if you invert it, what are you going to have? DFB. Yeah, DFB. And then if you invert it again, you have FBD. Yeah. The point is, like, diminished triads, first of all, are symmetrical, right? Symmetrical. The distance between each interval is the same. What that means is if you do your first inversion, you do D, F, B. Is that right? D, F, B. Yeah, that's the order. That's a D diminished triad now. There is no difference between a B diminished triad and a D diminished triad, or an F diminished triad. How exciting did this just get? Because check it out. Check this out. If we have an A diminished chord, we could assume that we're in the key of B flat, right? Or we could go from A to C. We had a C diminished chord. We could assume that A diminished is actually an inverted C diminished chord, and as C means C diminished would mean the 7th chord would mean we'd be in the key of D flat. So an A diminished chord could mean we're in B flat or D flat. What if we invert that A diminished again? We go up to E flat. That'd be a minor third up from C. It'd be E flat. E flat diminished chord, or actually I'll say D sharp. Same thing, but not quite. Same pitches, same sound. D sharp diminished. That'd be an inverted C diminished, which would be an inverted A diminished, right? So a D sharp diminished, if that were the 7 chord, because we don't have a 7 to tell us it's what it is, it's just a diminished triad, then that could be the 7th chord of E. So if we have an A diminished triad, you could be in the key of B flat, D flat, or E. See that? So if you have a progression that goes, let's say, I don't know, 1 chord, let's do the one we talked about for a moment before. 2-5-1, right? D minor, G7, C major 7, and then you go to the B diminished. B diminished could be the 7 chord, right? Which naturally would lead to the 6 chord, or probably to the 6 chord or the 1 chord. 7 chord would want to go probably to the 1 chord. But you could go to the 6 chord. Anyway, but what if that B diminished is actually borrowed from a different key? Meaning B diminished could be an inverted D diminished. So if it were D diminished, you'd be in the key of E flat, which means you might be changing keys when you hear a diminished chord. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Basically, here's what I would recommend as homework, right? The arbitrary number like 5. Doesn't matter. Write down, without playing the guitar, write down 5 progressions. These could be 4 measure progressions with 1 chord each measure. If you really want to get, I would recommend 8 because you're a pretty advanced student. So I would say like do 8 measures. Do a progression of 8 measures and do 5 of them, maybe. You can do however many you want. And do them completely diatonic with no key changes. Okay? Actually, maybe do a couple first and then play them and go, oh, that sounds good. You didn't know how it was going to sound when you wrote it down. You just know that all the chords are in one key. So you play it and you find out, oh, that sounds good. Or you find out, well, it doesn't sound bad because none of these sound like wrong chords, because they can't be. They're all in one key. They're all derivatives of each other, and they're all relative to each other. They're all derivatives of the scale that they come from. So they can't sound bad exactly, but it's like, it could have sounded better. Why didn't it sound that good? And what you're going to find is that you're measuring basically the sense of resolution from one chord to the next. You're measuring how much it matters. How big this chord to that chord, does it make an impact or was it boring? And you're going to start to notice certain things. Some you already may know, like the 5 chord going to the 1 chord is good. That's the most famous one there is, right? 2-5-1 is a popular progression. You can throw that in. You got 8 measures, right? But you obviously, if you're in a key and you end on a 3 chord, it's not going to sound very resolved. If you end on a 6 chord, it might, because that is the relative minor. So it'll sound like you changed keys. You didn't. But it'll sound like you changed keys to the relative minor. Hey, we're in minor. Good night, everybody. Or what if your song started on a 2 chord? Might be a little confusing, but that's because a lot of really weird and confusing, like what is going on in this crazy, wild Bill Evans songs. And yet Bill Evans is the master. That's amazing. So, Bach's probably the master, but Beethoven was great. I mean, what did I say before? Bill Evans is great. Anyway, so maybe you start on the 2 chord, but what you're gonna find is like, what if I repeat my progression? 2 chord, it is the first chord and it ends on a 3 chord. That means at the end of my song to the beginning of my song is gonna go 3 to 2. It's like, this is probably not gonna be all that good. Maybe you should, if you think it's not gonna be good, write it down and try it out and be like, oh yeah, confirmed, Or maybe actually it sounds good. I didn't realize that. Why did it sound good, And then catalog. Oh, this sounded good. I'm gonna remember. That's a cool trick. See if I can remember that trick. And basically, like you could do that. Maybe do 2 of them, 2 of these 8 measure things. Then do the other 3 with some of that in mind. Like, okay, well, I probably should start my song on a 1 chord, or maybe I'll do a major triad. So they'll think it's a 1 chord, but really it's a 4 chord. And I'm going to wait to reveal that. I'm going to see how long I can wait to reveal that C was a 4 chord all along, right? Now, this is kind of thing you can do, but this is already like, there's another step, which is the next step where you actually change keys. See, there's a big difference between going to a minor chord and making them think you went to a new key, the relative minor, because you're in the same chord structure, right? They're all the same derivatives, the same scale. So, or being ambiguous. Here's a C major triad. I bet you think that's the 1 chord. Well, you're going to find out in 4 measures. that it was the 4 chord all along, you know? That's you being ambiguous, kind of tricky, kind of like leading them on to think something that's not the case. That's very different than them being legitimately, like them legitimately acknowledging this is in the key of C. And now we're not. Whoa, feel that impact? We just moved, you know? We changed direction. So then you can practice changing keys. You can play games. Like I'm gonna start in one key. My goal is to write a song that's got 64 measures. And my goal is to change key 4 times within those 64 measures. And I want to end in the same key I began in. You know, now that'd be a bigger goal. You know, you could start small. You know, like you could have a goal of how can I do an 8 measure progression where I change from one key to another, and what I effectively do is I change through all of them within my C major scale. So C that modulates into the key of G. Actually, I'm going to do this more systematically. C that somehow modulates into the key of D. C that somehow modulates into the key of E. C that somehow modulates into the key of F, and so forth. Always modulating, man. I'm actually changing keys. And the way you know is there is no D in the key of C. D would be D minor, right? So if somehow we're in the key of D at the end with a D major chord, that's obviously we've changed keys now for real, you know? And that would be then a huge step. Taking a step farther, okay, how do we change keys then to chords that weren't in our original, right? So ordinarily we have a D minor, but somehow we changed it so that we were eventually ended up into the key of D. You know, what about C sharp? How would I modulate from C to C sharp? That's harder to do. We're not ready for that yet, but like it's still possible. This is a fun thing. Anyway, so just because you have a hand problem right now doesn't have to slow you down at all. If you can pick it up to strum a few chords to check what you've done, you know, then you're good. If you usually practice a half hour a day or an hour a day, spend the same amount of time and do it with a pen and paper, and then test your results. You know, let's see how this worked out. How was this chord progression? You know, you start to challenge yourself. You start to think, okay, I'm going to C chord to a G chord to a C chord to an F. Oh, that, you know, to a G to a D. Okay, now I bet you now they think I've changed keys because you have. I bet they think I've changed key to G because I got D, right? And I go back to G and I go to C and I go to G and I go to D. And then I go to A. Where did A come from? Oh, well, D was the 4 of A, right? And then I go from A back to D. They don't know that this D is now the 1 chord because in my mind, that A I just went from, it suddenly became the 5 chord. And then I go to G to A to D, and we're in the key of D now. And like maybe then I go D to A, and then I play an E. Well, that's the same trick I did before to get from G to E is the 5 of A, which means we must be in the key of A right now. You know? And then like you can kind of, well, now I'm going to go to I'm going to do my 2 chord, and my 2 chord is a B. It's minor, right? I play minor, and then I raise my 3rd, so it suddenly became a major chord, and then I play an E. Well, now I've changed key to the key of E because when I change that 2 into a major chord, the 7 may not be played. I may just be playing triads, but it's still implied. The 2 chord had a minor 7 to it. It's supposed to. That's what's like genetically in there. And so then when I did a 3rd, that 7 genetically would still be there just because I didn't change it. I didn't play to begin with. I just played the 3rd. And so that means it's got to be a dominant chord, which means I went to it was a 5 chord, which then went to 1. And like just changing keys and trying to keep like, you just want to like exploit the hell out of it. Just exercise that muscle, and then you can do it when you want to, you know. You can overdo it. Feel free to overdo it at first, you know. I am. But I am thinking of a guitar fretboard still. I'm not thinking of a piano when I do it. And I'm not thinking of just alphabetic letters on paper. And I'm not just thinking of floating alphabet letters either. You know what I mean? Like, and I haven't quite memorized it the way some people do. Some people actually, oh, this is the 5 of that. This is 5 of that. I mean, I have memorized that, but there's an instant flash where I see the fretboard, you know? So it's like, I still see the fretboard. I can't unsee it. I used it for so long to help me know what to do, what it would be. It was my cognitive method. It wasn't the wheel of fifths and some diagram and counting on fingers. There's none of that. It's always just the fretboard. That's all I saw. So that's still what I see, even if it's a moment. And that's good. Beyond that is seeing possibilities. But to see possibilities, you have to know of them first. So, like, I am wondering, like, where am I blind? Like, what are the possibilities that I haven't thought of? Like, what is Bach doing here and there that I haven't thought of? So I'll try to look at what he does because he's so amazing. But like, it could be as simple as just changing any chord into a dominant chord, and that means you're 5 of a new key, and that's essentially what happens. But anyways, I better let you go. Do you have any questions? Here's what I would recommend. 8 measure progressions. You could start with 4 measures. There's no real assignment. The assignment is what you need to know to like occupy your time and to exercise this material. So you could start as small or as heavy duty as you want to. If you start with 4 measures, you could try to, in 4 measures, try to change the key from the key of C. Oh, sorry, that's way later. First, you just write chord progressions in one key. Start in the key of C. You know, it's this easy. It's actually easier than knowing the letters. You just use the numbers. 1 chord, 4 chord, 6 chord, 3 chord. How does that sound? You try it out. Probably not going to sound that good. My guess, probably not going to sound that good because, well, 6 chord going to a 3 chord is like, that's like A is the 4. It could work out. And then the 3 down to the 1, there's nothing at all like tension resolution from the 3 to the 1 that way. It'll sound okay. It can't sound bad. They're meant to live under the same roof, you know. But whether or not they're laughing, you know, like that, their interactions may not be that. It might be mundane, and that's kind of what I'm guessing that progression I just said would be. Now I could say, okay, 1 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord. Okay, and then when it starts over, go back to your 1 chord, right? 1, 2, it's like that'd be your 4 measures. So I'm not technically ending on the 5 chord if I intend to repeat it. So I'll put a repeat sign, you know? And then it's like that, then there'd be that. Or I could intend to not repeat it. So the 4th measure would be the final end. So then I don't want to end on a 5 chord. That wouldn't be good. It would sound unresolved at least. So I go, how about 1 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord. 4 to 1 does work, right? It kind of has this amen sound. 4, 1, right? Or 1 chord, 3 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord. You know what I mean? And that will be more resolved, but it's not necessarily better than the 4. It's going to be a little bit more resolved. So somebody could say it's better in that way. But so what I'm suggesting is start off. I would just, before you even write letters, just write Roman numerals. And just write progressions just arbitrarily indifferent, without judgment, without judgment, which is good, by the way. This may not sound good, but you don't have to. You can't be intend to know what that sounds like yet. Just write them down, then strum them. Go, oh yeah, that worked. Oh, it obviously they're all going to work. This wasn't that good. It could be better. I think it could be. There'd be one that's a bit more interesting, and that's you using your judgment. So write them down first. You might find out, you know, just, oh, I'm doing the same thing all the time. Let me try something different. What if I just start on the 4 chord and then I do my progression, you know, that ends on a 1 chord, you know, or, you know, like just write down numerals and then do it all in the key of C since you have them all written out. Then try taking the same progressions you wrote down and try them in a different key, which will kind of exercise not your compositional side so much, but more your like fretboard awareness or like your musical harmony awareness. Like this is all inside, you know. Just stay inside first. Then when you do that for a little while, I mean, if you practice an hour a day and you did this for an hour a day, you're gonna notice like 2 days, you're gonna be like, I want to try modulate from one key to another. You know, and then set up goals like that where I'm going to change from one key to another in 4 measures or in 8 measures. You know, it should take this long to write one out. All right, 1, 6, 3, 2, 5, 4, 7, 1. That's the end of the song. That's how long it takes to do this, right? That's one example. If you did 5, I mean, you could do 5 in half a minute. Just write down numbers, you know, Roman numerals. If you know your Roman, then what you do is you sit down and go, "Oh, dude, actually, that 7 to 1 was cool," you know, in the end, or that 5 to 2 was really not cool, or whatever you might find. There's some songs where they are 5 to 2s in the real book, 5-2, 5-2, and you're going like, "Whoa, this is." But then you hear somebody play it a certain way. We're talking voice leading and anything. Even if what you write down sounds terrible, it can't sound terrible because it's all in the right key. But if it doesn't sound good, somebody is going to play it a certain way. It's going to make it sound great. That's another topic. These are all kind of different things. So just start working in this way. Just start working in this direction. Your goal is the doing, not the have done it, you know? So anyway, cool. Yeah, man. Well, I felt like we should go on long anyway, since it's not your usual guitar type thing. But we always go long. I like it. Obviously, I would cut myself off if I was hating this, but I don't at all. I like it. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. All right. If you have a scanner, write down your stuff. And the day before our next lesson or something, or the day of the lesson, whatever works. Email it to me, and we can look through it together and talk about it. That'd be cool. So then I'm expecting something. As far as how much, doesn't matter. All right. All right, good, man. All right, have a good week.